Here is part 2 of the JRPGs I've played for 2025. This will follow on from part 1 where I played 14 games, link is going to be in the description. The 15th game I played was Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Played on Nintendo Switch and it took me 112 hours to finish. The one Blade title that was stuck in purgatory in the Wii U right up until 2025. It's fair to say that a lot of people didn't get to play this game when it first released nearly 10 years ago due to hardware exclusivity to a console that not many owned. I was one such person. I sold my Wii U soon after buying it, and as such I had heard about Xenoblade Chronicles X but never got the chance to experience it for myself, so I was one of many cheering in jubilation when I found out it was getting a definitive re-release on the Switch. But hype can so easily kill a game. What matters more is its quality when you finally get to experience it firsthand. Was it one of those titles that met the hype? Xenoblade Chronicles X takes place in a universe where humanity is caught in the crossfire between two advanced alien races. The ensuing battle causes the Earth to be destroyed, and the last remnants of humanity escape into the stars to find a new home via a number of arcs. Eventually, one of the arcs, the White Whale, crash lands on a potential new home called Mira. The passengers established a city of New LA from the wreckage of the White Whale, and work to find a way to live on this beautiful yet dangerous new world. And to say this world is beautiful is an understatement. Monolith Soft are tech wizards. They push the Switch to lengths that shouldn't be possible. They have made Mira into one of the most vast, engaging worlds within the JRPG genre. I've no doubt they did the same for the original back in 2015 too. In terms of scale and world exploration, no other Xeno game beats X. Xenoblade Chronicles X is definitively the best game for exploration in the series. There is no argument as far as I'm concerned. The idea is that New LA is attempting to get more data on the region surrounding the city, and to do this an organisation called Blade is set up, and members are then split into their own specialty units which brave the wilds to set probes and excavate treasures around the land. The map of Mira is huge, split into 5 distinct areas, and each one has a number of hexagons with a point of interest, split between a probe, a treasure, some sort of side event, or a tyrant enemy. To map out everything and do every bit of side content available, you would need hundreds of hours, and that is no exaggeration. Starting the journey on foot, I just felt so insignificant on the planet of Mira. There were dangerous enemies all over the place. Xenoblade Chronicles X certainly nails the pioneering atmosphere. It stands to reason that an unknown planet is full of wonder, but also danger. It became a common part of the game for me to just dodge around enemies as I made my way to the points of interest. Though in many cases I would be fighting too. The battle system is reminiscent of the first Xenoblade game with the skills mapped on a bar. You've got your attacking abilities, buffs and debuffs, but you can also switch between melee and ranged combat, which opens up different abilities. In addition, the protag can switch between different classes via a dedicated tree, and you can equip a variety of passive boons as you level them up. It's fun. If you enjoyed the original Xenoblade Chronicles offering, then you'll likely be fine with this too, though if I had one complaint about it, it's that fighting in any sort of small area is a test in patience. I can't count the amount of times my allies pulled a group of enemies by being stupid, or a cannon shot me through a wall while in an enemy base. That's just pure jank. There's plenty of customization for the characters too, and the same can be said for the skells. The skells operate fairly similarly to the ground-based combat, though their arts come from the items you equip to the frame. You've also got elements like augments to boost the parameters of your gear further, and as far as Xenoblade as a series goes, it's in line with what I've seen before. All of this equipment and other miscellaneous crafting material is found either through taking out enemies, or salvaging the vast amounts of raw refuse around Mira as you explore. And what's interesting about the game is that you're free to explore however you want. If you want to push on to the northern regions out of a sense of curiosity, then you can do that, though it will take you a fair amount of time to do so. There are pretty much no invisible walls to be seen in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Monolith Soft just gave a sandbox to work with and put the player in the middle of it. In the majority it works well. You start on foot, but eventually you find new ways to explore when you finally earn your Skell unit, and that soon enriches further with the added flight module. The scales are such a cool part of this game too, and what's better is that eventually you can make the higher end models which not only look badass, they're just straight up busted, as if you're being rewarded for going that extra mile. I spent a fair amount of time accumulating material tickets so I could buy myself a set of the Ares 90 scale frames, and it was totally worth it. By the time I got this, nothing could touch me with the exception of some select high level enemies.
Attack up close! Alright, feel like a new man.
Now back in New LA itself, the self-insert protag can either take on a host of side quests, affinity missions, or indeed progress the main story. The handling of quests though is one of my biggest issues with the game, though I do understand why they've done it this way. While standard side quests can be accepted in bulk, the same cannot be said for the affinity or main story missions. For those you can only accept one at a time. The reason being is because certain characters are restricted when you accept them. So to avoid any crossing of the wires essentially, Monolith Soft felt that limiting these missions was the best course of action. The problem with this approach though is that if you choose an affinity mission for instance that asks you to go to a far off part of the planet, you have to do it, because there is also no way to abandon said mission when you take it on. It's sink or swim, quite literally. Within the first 5 hours I learnt to save before taking on any sort of affinity mission for this reason, because in some cases they wanted me to go to landmasses that would take me hours to traverse on foot. Saying that, the affinity missions themselves in terms of content are worth it. In fact, all the side quests are. They're far better than anything seen in, say, Xenoblade Chronicles 1, with unique stories tied to each one, and some pretty unhinged dialogue, it has to be said.
One of the vegetables is sentient.
Talking potato. Huh. I wonder if it tastes different too. I know what we're having for dinner tonight. You don't know it yet, new girl, but I'm a pretty mean cook.
You are mean and cruel. Tatsu definitely not potato.
The affinity missions in particular will also grant access to new arts, or even a completely new character who can join you on your journey, so there's no reason not to check them out. Though I do have to point out that the sound mixing in some of these missions is a bit off. The music by default is way too loud at times during these cutscenes.
A concentrated strike with a team of our very best and brightest. Them.
Us?
Tatsu?
Sounds interesting.
I guess that explains why they're attending top secret meetings. Always a step ahead. Hey, Commander?
What? No, we're just here to...
That's why you pay me the big bucks, am I right?
As for the story itself, this is the point of contention essentially, because the Xeno series, that's Gears, Saga and Blade, are known for their deep and engaging narratives. It's a mainstay of the series essentially. I just expect some sort of grand sci-fi epic from Takahashi & Co when I play one of these games. Yet Xenoblade Chronicles X isn't in that mould. As a standalone story, it's good. X has a fair amount of epic moments in its runtime, but the actual content of the story is not at the level of its peers. It's actually quite a basic story all said and done. It's full of repetitive dialogue and jokes like the infamous Tatsu as a food gag, a quip that was repeated so often that it actually came full circle and started to be somewhat funny again, so respect to the writers for seeing it through, I guess.
I still need a no-pon recipe to die for.
I've no doubt that one reason for the narrative shortcomings though comes from the antagonists. They are weak in this game, nothing to the level of, say, Albedo from Xenosaga. I think the main issue is that though there are many individual enemies, their motivation all falls under the same umbrella, like a hive mind. So as a result, there's no individuality to these characters, no backstory to them, they all kind of fall into a singular entity. It's just an enemy that needs to be beaten, and it never extends beyond that. So there are issues on display, though I will say that the story did grab me in some respects, especially near the end of the original offering. Not a highlight of the game, but worth seeing through. Yet the Definitive Edition also brought in its own additions to that story. Once the credits roll, you get a sort of epilogue to see through, which adds another 5 or so hours to that narrative. If I'm being honest, I preferred how the original ended. While the Definitive Edition added detail to the more cloudy elements of the original X's story, I was just more in tune with what they did prior. No doubt that's going to be subjective, but it is what it is. In conclusion though, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is totally worth it. In terms of value for money, there aren't many games that eclipse it. You're getting a stupid amount of hours out of the game without even realising where that time went. It's another fantastic game from Monolith Soft and a must-play JRPG of 2025. The 16th game I played was Zwei, the Arges Adventures on PC, and it took me 15 hours to finish. Neon Falcon, that name has not let me down since I first discovered it all those years ago. Like I say, I have played lesser Falcon games, but nothing could prepare me for what I was about to experience here. This is one of the more well-hidden Neon Falcon titles. The developer is more known for Trails, East, and you could say Xanadu as well nowadays, but the two Zwei games are often forgotten. Simply put, I needed a palate cleanser after playing Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Zwei seemed to be the right call. It was cheap, I saw that it could be finished in a decent time frame, so I gave it a go. And for a game that released back in 2001, it's still sort of fun in aspects, though in the same breath, it can be tedious and frustrating in others. It is no doubt the worst Falcon game I have played to date. Zwei is very much an old school RPG. There's a lack of direction, a lot of backtracking, lots of optional content, and some archaic game design. It's also clear to me that I wasn't the only one who found it frustrating. When I finished it, I could see only 6% of Steam players had seen it through to the end, and that's 7 years after it got the port. Following my playthrough, I can totally understand why many people would drop it. Zwei starts innocently enough. Two siblings called Pipero and Pockle set off on a journey to recover 6 relics that were stolen from their village. They set out on the fairly small floating landmass of Arges and venture through a number of dungeons to find and return them to their home at Puck Village. So Zwei is a dungeon crawler, and it uses an action-centric approach. Pipero is the ranged mage, Pockle is the melee bruiser, and you can freely switch between them on the fly. There's also a pet companion you can get who can assist you in battle or pick up any items that are dropped. Now on the surface, the combat is easy to understand. You have a standard attack mapped to the A button, a charge attack if you hold it in, and that's it. Seriously, there's very little here as far as action RPGs go. And with that, structurally the game isn't too complex. In many cases that is exactly the case. The dungeons are laid out in a standard format with a number of different floors, and there are some puzzles here and there to solve to progress further down or get some optional treasures, though they're very easy to solve, nothing that's going to blow your mind. The idea is that you progress through the lower level dungeons first, which are marked by a tile on the floor near the entrance, and gradually you level up and make your way to the more difficult variants, which are often locked off anyway until you have a certain item. However, the combat and navigation of the dungeons themselves present some clear issues almost immediately. For one, the camera. It is awful. An action RPG that uses a camera not centered around the controlled character is mad. There is no reason for it to be misaligned like this. I can't count the amount of times I had to just tiptoe forward because I had no idea what was waiting for me. An issue that could partly be remedied if the camera was centered. Thankfully, I eventually unlocked a minimap feature that showed the enemies as dots on it, so I would often glance at that for forewarning. But still, that is a big annoyance. It didn't end there though. Interacting with buttons or switches is mapped to the same button as your attack, which causes Pockle, for example, to charge forward like an absolute idiot. You have to wait for the exclamation point to show above you before you can be certain you'll interact with it. And that's if you're lucky enough not to simultaneously be pelted by enemies on the other side of a gate that you're attempting to open. Seriously, there are fairly involved switch-based puzzles at times as well that are made even more stressful because of enemies throwing lightning bolts every 2 seconds. Not to mention, some puzzles are just not optimised for a controller. There was one in particular where I had to place items in a treasure chest, but the only way to do that was to use my mouse and manually drop it in. The port overall, though it was stable, felt like an afterthought for other control schemes outside of mouse and keyboard. And that becomes very apparent with easily the worst part about the game. The inventory management is chaos. Pretty much every item you acquire ends up in your bag. There is also a hotbar at the bottom of the screen for quick access. My main problem with it is that it once again was not tailored for a controller. Moving stuff around my inventory, rearranging key items, a lot of this frustration could easily be alleviated if similar items just stacked together. For example, why can't bombs just be consolidated into one visual with a number next to it? They do it in the vendor screens, so why not in my bag? I mean, it looks an absolute mess. As for moving the items, it is also asinine. You have to actively hold the A button down and then drag it to the space you want. Why drag it? Why can't it just be selected? And the hotbar? That's not much better. The whole point of the bar is to make it easier to manage items on the fly, for example having healing items at the press of a button. But it becomes so cumbersome because some of those slots have to be taken up by your equipment, up to 5 pieces. Another one will be needed for the adventuring gear, like the hook shot, and then one more for an optional scroll you can equip. All said and done, I had about 4 spaces left to use for healing items, and when one of them was used, any item I picked up would immediately default into that hotbar, taking up another space unless I manually changed it around. A solution to this would be to have a number of slots just dedicated to healing items, the rest for gear and all that jazz. That way, it keeps a player in the action without having to constantly juggle things around in the bag. And get this, because of all the mess that naturally builds up in your bag, it's very easy to sell or store away a key item, like the relics that are the whole point of the game. Seriously, you can sell the relics to a vendor like any other item. Yeah, sure, you can buy them back at a premium, but why even have that option there? Even games from half a decade before Zwei would ensure that a player didn't sell a key item. It's madness. Now, inventory management is not only important for the adventure itself, it becomes a key part of boss battles too. You can only equip a limit of healing items per fight. You can't re-enter your inventory when the battle begins. Pipero and Pockle face off against a number of these bosses throughout the journey, both mandatory and optional. And I hate to say it, but these bosses are terrible in the majority, purely down to the limited amount of options given to the player in combat. Like I said earlier, I had a basic attack and a charged attack, nothing more. No dodge, no sprint, no jump, nothing. And these bosses at times have laser focused tracking, like literally doing U-turns mid-animation just to hit me. Worse, the game actively removes one of your attacking options. The charge attack, which you use by holding the A button, is split into 4 different tiers. Your amount of successive combos will determine what tier of charge attack is stored, and these are shown below your health bar. The problem though, is that the higher level charge attacks are useless against many of the bosses because they're just gonna heal right through them. It was an obvious countermeasure to prevent players cheesing a boss, as some of these charge attacks are very powerful, but outright removing that option from my already limited collection of moves? Not cool. Add on to this the lack of direction in many cases, cheap deaths due to being overwhelmed by enemies partly incurred by the bad camera. Zwei was flawed, and I was quite close to dropping it. But I didn't, because for all that jank, I did have a fairly good time with it all said and done. Not a massive one, but, you know, I got some semblance of fun out of it. The game does have some pretty cool ideas in there. I like the amount of optional content there is. There are a huge amount of dungeons that you can miss if you're just focusing on the main story, often rewarding you with some of the best equipment and items in the game if you choose to take them on. The dungeons themselves can often only be unlocked by using a certain item at a particular spot, like a sandbag at an oasis to lower the water level and open the dungeon entrance. The OST is great. This is Sound Team JDK of the early 2000s, they were still at their peak around this time, and the characters overall are pretty good. The game doesn't take itself too seriously overall. There's a bunch of unhinged dialogue and tongue-in-cheek humour from Pockle and Pipero in particular. Yeah, it got the odd smile out of me as I went through. And I actually found myself coming around to the idea of leveling in this game. You see, in Zwei you don't level up by killing enemies, you can only do so by eating food. Certain food items will heal you, but also grant a number of experience points, and you're incentivized to hold on to stacks of them so you could trade them in for a higher quality item that yields more experience. It's an interesting take to that standard RPG element, and I found myself liking it quite a bit. And with that is it for Zwei, and despite how I felt about it, it's one of the only games I bothered to get all achievements for just because it's short. If I'm being honest, I wish I hadn't and just left it when the credits rolled. It's fun in parts, but damn is it frustrating in others. An interesting tidbit here is that apparently the final achievement is bugged as well, though I had no such issue thankfully. And it looks like I wasn't the only one, there were a couple of players who did get all of those achievements. It's not going to be for everyone, but for its shorter length and low admission price of £13, you could do worse, I guess. The 17th game I played was Yakuza Kiwami, played on PC, and it took me 39 hours to finish. After Yakuza 0 hooked me into what this series was all about, it didn't take long for me to try out the remake of the first game in Kiwami. Set over a decade from the first game, Kiryu has just served a 10-year prison sentence and finds himself once again in the crosshairs of a feud surrounding the Tojo clan. Kiryu, being the badass that he is, single-handedly works to sort it out. Now, while I'd like to talk a fair amount about Kiwami, if you saw the review I did on Zero, then there's not much else to say about this one. Kiwami is very similar to Zero in terms of structure, though instead of controlling both Majima and Kiryu, you can only control Kiryu for this game. You walk around the Tokyo district of Kamurocho, once again preceding the main story, completing side quests and playing the odd minigame. Most of the good stuff that was on Zero applies here as well. The presentation and cutscene direction is very good, the side stories are well worth doing, the minigames are great, though I'm sad that there's no longer any cabaret club management or disco. Disco in particular, look, I know the game is set in the mid-2000s and thus disco is dead, but you could at least give me the Dance Dance Revolution at an arcade. That's still a thing even now. Yet Kiwami does do a few things differently. The combat brings back a similar layout in terms of different stances that Kiryu can use, but it also introduces a fourth stance to him specifically called Dragon Style. This style is meant to be representative of Kiryu's position as the Dragon of Dojima, or at least it was before he got locked up. But after 10 years, his skills have dulled, and a lot of the abilities linked to the Dragon Style are lost to him. The only way he can get them back is through one-on-one training with certain NPCs, or the Barrel of Laughs, that is Majima himself. Though Majima isn't a playable character here, he plays a really fun support role as a sort of mentor to Kiryu, popping out of traffic cones or bins to get the jump on him in order to slowly bring Kiryu back up to speed. Though his screen time is limited, he is still one of the highlights of a playthrough. Another addition comes in the combat itself. Kiryu now has access to Kiwami heat actions which have to be unlocked through fairly sizable skill trees. When unlocked, these moves can be activated when the enemy glows a certain colour. As long as you're in the right stance and have the heat gauge filled, you can bust their head with a flashy finisher, which I quite liked overall. The combat in general is still pretty good, it only gets better as more moves open up, though it has to be said, I think the balance of Yakuza 0 was stronger in the majority, especially in regards to boss fights. While Kiwami was mostly fair, there are some cheap bosses in this game, especially the second to last one that has the boss and two extremely annoying minions who have the audacity to return to life as well. Which is a shame, because this chapter is the coolest part of the game for me, and it's followed by my favourite fight in the series thus far. It's an awesome fight, both in terms of mechanics and its significance to the story of Kiwami. Too bad it was diluted by a terrible opener. As for that story, it's great. In a bubble, the narrative of Kiwami is still solid, though understandably it's not at the level of Zero in my opinion, but considering this is a remake of the first game from 2005, I'm not surprised. And after comparing the remake to the original, it looked to be quite faithful story-wise, like literal one-to-one cutscene direction in some cases. With the exception of a few additions like the Majima Everywhere mechanic, new sub-stories and minigames, and some additions to the narrative to assist in flow, it follows a mostly similar structure to the original. And all in all, there's not much more to say. If you played Zero, you'll find a lot of similarity to Kiwami, though for me, Zero is the superior game. Still, that doesn't mean I had a bad time with Kiwami. In some cases, it's a product of its time, but it's still a great game all said and done. Well worth checking out. The 18th game I played was Clair Obscur Expedition 33, played on PC, and it took me 58 hours to finish. A full review was done on this, you can check that out in the description. I quickly ran out of superlatives for this game. Sandfall Interactive created not only the best JRPG of 2025, yes, it is a JRPG as far as I'm concerned, I don't give a shit if it was made in France, it feels like a JRPG, it looks like a JRPG, that's enough for me. Not only did they create the best JRPG of 2025, they also created the best game of 2025. Astounding when you consider it was their first game as a studio too. Clair Obscur has everything at a top tier level. Music, story, characters, visuals, sound design, gameplay, and it also has something that I really appreciate, which is a lack of padding. So often JRPGs like to add on meaningless fluff to artificially bloat playtime. Clair Obscur does not have any of that, and I want more developers to take note. I'd rather drink a small cup of delicious juice than a pint of diluted mud. I'll be surprised if any game I play tops Clair Obscur by the end of 2025. It is a masterpiece. The 19th game I played was the original Sakura Wars, Saturn emulated, and it took 16 hours to finish. This one isn't the 2020 Sakura Wars, this is the original 1996 version on the Sega Saturn. Though the game has yet to receive an official release in the West and probably never will, a fan translation that was completed 4 years ago was the way I was able to play it, and thank you to all those who worked on it. I got the kick to check this out because this same group also released a fan translation for the direct sequel in April 2025, so I thought why not check out this one first and then check out the sequel later on. And the reason I wanted to do so is because though my only exposure to Sakura Wars to date was through the 2020 reboot, I really liked it, and was a little disappointed that the only other game available to me in an official sense was the 5th game back on the PS2. So when I saw the 2 fan translations I thought why not, and quickly jumped into the game that started it all. Now yes, it's not a JRPG, but it is a game that JRPG fans can enjoy, which is why I'm more than happy to talk about it. Sakura Wars is more a hybrid title. It's got elements of dating sims, visual novels and SRPGs all in one package, but in between all that, it has a certain appeal and charm that allows it to stand apart rather than a mishmash of genres lacking an identity. When it first released, Sakura Wars was huge, and if you go to any second-hand game store in Japan, you'll see it all over the place. Even now, it's still well regarded, especially among Japanese players, and after playing the reboot, I wasn't surprised that I found myself enjoying this one too. Sakura Wars is set in the Japanese Taisho era around the 1920s, where a promising member of the Japanese Navy, Ichiro Ogami, is reassigned as captain of the Flower Division, a branch of the Imperial Assault Troop. Though he initially is perplexed when he is stationed at the Grand Theatre, where his squad members appear to be stage actresses, he soon realises that it's all a front for the secret work they do, which involves protecting Tokyo from demonic forces. The eventual developments and threats that face the capital become the basis of the story, with Ogami and the heroines working and growing together over that period. Now what allows Sakura Wars to stand apart is its presentation. The game made me feel like I was playing through an anime, which was an intentional design choice. The whole idea of using the anime cutscenes and approach was to allow the characters to have more depth, and in my opinion it works. The various cutscenes still hold up in many respects and are a window back to that 1990s style, all while adding an undeniable charm to the presentation. While a few of these scenarios are tied to the main story, there are plenty of other instances that are optional. Ogami will get opportunities to wander around the theatre to check up on the other members in between battles, and upon meeting some, he might have to make some choices. This is called the Live and Interactive Picture System, or LIPS for short, and was indeed the same system used in the reboot, where Ogami has a limited time to respond. This once again was a choice from the development staff, as they felt it was more realistic and allowed for snap decisions that were more true to the person playing. There's no doubt that this is where most of my enjoyment was had. All of the heroines are well defined with unique personalities. They all get ample focus at different parts of the story, and the character design shown via the sprite art is really good. Not too surprising considering it was done by Kosuke Fujishima, creator of Oh My Goddess. The characters and interactions along with the anime approach were the best parts about the game, and it was no different here. The gameplay on the other hand was just average, and that thought process once again carried over to this game as well. Unlike the reboot, which had an action-centric approach, the original had a strategic style similar to franchises like Fire Emblem. Each member of the division takes control of a Corbu unit, which is basically a mech, and specialise in certain facets of combat. Kana is great on the front line, Maria is better at range, Iris is a healer with better movement capabilities, and so on. Each member has a standard attack, a special move, and there's also a combo move that uses both characters' special gauges to use. Turn order is shown via a number next to their character portraits, and that's it. As far as SRPGs goes, it's rudimentary. There's no elements like terrain advantages or attacking from behind, it's just kind of there. The only thing that I do believe is worth highlighting are the moods of the characters before a fight. Depending on Ogami's choices, it will affect the mood of each heroine, ranging from high spirits at best to a terrible mood at worst. These moods will determine how well they perform in combat, with stat boosts given for those in good moods and debuffs given to those who are the opposite. It's small, but it's a meaningful element of the game and gives added importance to the choices made, so I found myself liking it quite a bit. And all in all, that thought process applies to the entire game. It's a short one, so there's not much more for me to say about it, but I'm glad I played it. And within the next 2 months or so, I'll play the sequel as well. If you have the means to do so, I'd recommend checking it out as well if you liked the reboot. The 20th game I played was the Sea of Stars DLC Throes of the Watchmaker, played on PC and it took 7 hours to finish. Once again, full review in the description. All in all, I liked it better than the base game. I feel like Throes of the Watchmaker still suffers from some deep-rooted problems that are just part of Sea of Stars, like its turn-based combat feeling quite shallow in terms of strategy, and animations taking way too long. But it also addressed issues surrounding the main characters. It removed some of the more annoying cast members, and there was clearly effort to add a better flow to the gameplay in terms of introducing new abilities quicker. It's not going to be my favourite game of the year, but I appreciate the improvements that have been made. And as a free DLC that gives around 8 hours of new content, that's great value, it has to be said. The 21st game I played was Tonelico 2 Melody of Metaphalica, PS2 emulated, and it took 52 hours to finish. Once again, full review in the description. Brilliant game, another retro game that I finally got the chance to play, and one that was at least at the back of my mind after playing the first over a year ago. Tonelico 2 does a lot of the things that made the first game great, like its amazing music, deep characters, and beautiful and rich world, but it also made some additions to make the game stronger overall, like the new elements in combat like synchronity, the infel sphere which aided in the relationship between Luca and Cloche, the two main heroines, and finally it removed some more tedious aspects like the platforming. It's pretty much an improvement in nearly every way and still holds up in 2025. The 22nd game I played was Parasite Eve, PS1 emulated, and it took 16 hours to finish. Full review in the description. It's a Squaresoft classic, and it still holds up over 20 years later. Parasite Eve is an interesting combination, an RPG with horror elements which I'm personally thankful for. I am not too big on horror in general. The RPG fundamentals are much more prominent here. You play as Aya Brea, a rookie detective of the NYPD who is on the tail of the mysterious yet dangerous Eve, wandering around various landmarks of the city in order to put an end to the threat. It uses a combination of turn-based combat and action elements. Aya can move around in battle while her ATB gauge fills to dodge enemy attacks, and then can attack with her gun or use special abilities of her own. The FMV cutscenes still hold up in many respects, the pacing of the story is great, the imagery is creepy, the atmosphere is on point, and the music by Yoko Shimomura is excellent, as it so often is. It's a game that any RPG fan should play. The 23rd game I played was Progress Orders, played on PC, and I abandoned it after 12 hours. A full review in the description. It is the worst JRPG of 2025. I'll be surprised if anything takes the crown from this one. It was created by the same team that worked on Rune Factory and Story of Seasons, but that pedigree counted for nought in this game. In Progress Orders, you're basically an admin bitch. You run around and sort out paperwork and funding for the shops surrounding the guild, while the adventurers go out exploring, you know, doing the fun stuff. The gameplay is pretty much consistently navigating menus with the exception of the odd turn-based battle here and there as the parties you send out exploring bump into enemies. The upgrade system is needlessly confusing, the dialogue is terrible, the presentation is bare bones, and the game overall is boring, from top to bottom. It only costs 15 quid, but don't even bother, save your money and find something else. The 24th game I played was the Suikoden 2 HD Remaster, played on PC, and it took 37 hours to finish. I played Suikoden 2 back in March. I played it immediately after the first game, and for all intents it should have been in part 1 of this video series. However, I wasn't content with that playthrough. When I play a game for the first time, I'll always go in blind. I feel that using guides for a first run can diminish certain aspects of a game, like some story developments if I just so happen to glance at it before it happens. And that's not what I want. I want to play them by myself initially to get the best experience from that narrative. Only after that will I consider playing it again with a guide if there was something that I really wanted. And Suikoden 2 left a bitter taste in my mouth initially. There were certain things that I just didn't want to happen in terms of how the story played out, and it was partially the reason why I wanted to play it once again, with the aim of getting that true ending on my second run. I missed like 7 of the stars, and that pretty much locked me out of the best ending. It was only after reading the requirements that I realised how far off I actually was. The other reason though is because I had a damn good time with Suikoden 2. I wouldn't replay any game that I thought wasn't worth the investment. Suikoden 2, for the most part, was a step up from the first game. I liked the first game, but there were certain aspects about it I felt held it back. The second game, in the majority, improved upon it. Even so, I gave myself a break first, 2 months away from the game to reset my mind, and then I went back in with a guide so I didn't miss any of those ending requirements. Now, Suikoden 2 occurs 3 years after the first game. It takes place in the same world, but a different region. In this land, the Kingdom of Highland is attempting to invade the city-state of Jouston. With this as the backdrop, 2 childhood friends who are part of the Highlands Youth Brigade are betrayed by their commander and branded as traitors. These 2 friends eventually harness the power of separate halves of the Rune of Beginning, which ultimately locks them into a seemingly unavoidable fate. As far as I'm concerned, Suikoden 2 has a far better story than the first game. I was more engaged with the premise, the developments, the pacing felt better, and there wasn't really a moment within its narrative where I felt it was dragging. The 2 main characters, Ryo and Joey, I'm going to go with Joey because like that just seems the correct pronunciation, I don't give a toss to be honest if I'm right or wrong, certainly help in that regard, along with Nanami. This whole idea of 2 best friends, family and everything but name, having to choose between their ideals or their friendship is already a great premise. But Suikoden 2 executes it very well through the presentation of that friendship, and dialogue between them as well. Plus that's even more impressive considering that Ryo is a mute protagonist essentially. The player chooses the dialogue options for him. Really well done there. But it's not just the protagonist. The antagonist as well is excellent. Luca Blight is one of the most vile individuals ever seen in a JRPG. He is the epitome of evil, and what I love about his character is that he is unapologetically evil. I am open to redemption stories for antagonists, I have no issue with the idea of forgiving in these games. However, redemption for me can only be given up to a certain point. If the antagonist is just too far gone, then it serves that character's quality better to just leave them as. Luca Blight remains as he is right to the end, and it just makes him better. No question, this is a character where redemption simply wouldn't work. The things he does are just not in the realm of forgiveness, and I'm glad that Suikoden 2 maintained that aspect of his character. He's far more memorable because of it. He is not a character who is hated because he is badly written, he is hated because he is designed to be hated. Not to mention his boss fight is awesome, just putting that out there. And my praise of the lead characters extends to basically the entire cast. Just like in the first game, the whole idea is that Ryo is amassing an army by seeking out the 108 stars of destiny who are spread around the world. Some are easy to recruit, some are difficult, and a select few are bordering on Indiana Jones level. No wonder I didn't find them all the first time around. Some of the events to recruit these characters are not only very easy to miss, but require particular setups to pull off. For one, I had to have a team comprised completely of female characters to trigger an event in a certain city. For others, I had to have a space free in my party while exploring a particular road, and after some time the character would jump into the free spot. You're not left completely in the dark. There are certain characters who can provide hints for a fee, along with the tried and tested talk to every NPC, but yeah, I don't think I was getting the true ending without that guide. In general though, the characters feel more fleshed out, they've got more meaningful connections in some cases, and since this is a direct sequel, there are even some characters who return in this one, so they have a base to build off too. The combat is mostly the same, 6 characters maximum, 3 on the front, 3 on the back. Every character has a range at which they can attack, short, medium or long, and most of them can equip runes for special abilities. Needless to say, some are much better than others purely based on their stat spread and growth, but figuring that out lies with the player as it should. Saying that, another big improvement to Suikoden 2 is related to inventory management. Equipment was my biggest issue with the original Suikoden because of how cumbersome it ended up being. Suikoden 2 is much better. Still not perfect, but it was much easier to navigate overall. It never detracted from the core experience of the game. I'm glad it was addressed. In the same breath though, I do think the game still has some issues here and there, some of which are carried over from the first game. The dice minigame for one, which is used a few times annoyingly to recruit characters, is lame. No skill, no RNG manipulation, it's just press A and hope for the best. On my second playthrough, I was stuck on this minigame for, no joke, 20 minutes because my luck was not in. Thank goodness there was a save point nearby, or this could have been a deal breaker. Secondly, the autosave feature is once again useless. It pretty much only activates in rooms that already have a save point, so I guess it's for the small amount of players who don't manually save, but as far as utility goes, it's useless. For me, a good autosave should click off after every major event, for instance, after a boss battle. I think that's fair. Just like the first game though, Suikoden 2 doesn't have that. The final area, for example, has a fair amount of fighting, standard mobs and bosses before you finally get to a save point, not to mention some lengthy cutscenes beforehand and an army battle. And speaking of army battles, this is the one part of Suikoden 2 that I think is a downgrade from the first. It looks like a standard SRPG setup. You can move various units across the map, you've got special abilities, team compositions. The idea is good, but the delivery is bad. The army battles for the most part are glorified cutscenes. Many of them are scripted and will end after a certain number of turns, so there's not really any sort of urgency. Worse though, when you actually do get into a standard battle, it's far too RNG reliant. Battles between units come down to 2 metrics, attack and defense, that's it. And then based on those measures, there's a percentage-based chance that you can deal damage or defend. The problem though, is that these percentages are far too skewed in the direction of defense. It means that a unit with 3 times the attacking and defending power of the opposition can fail to hit, while the opponent can still get a shot in, and a pretty hefty one too. Yes, it can happen in games like Fire Emblem 2, chance is just a part of these games, but these moments happen too frequently in Suikoden 2. It's like the numerical advantages don't even matter. For me, the army battles are the worst aspect of this game. I much preferred the simple rock, paper, scissors approach of the first entry. But even with that, I still prefer Suikoden 2 overall. It's a testament to the game that I wanted to play it again because my first run left an emotional scar. I couldn't leave it like that. It's still an excellent game in many respects, and well worth any JRPG fan's time. The 25th game I played was Terra Memoria, played on PC and it took me 9 hours to finish. Terra Memoria takes place in the land of Terra, a world which uses the power of crystals for daily life. However, these crystals are slowly running out and a mage named Moshang, along with a summoner named Sil, set off to find the cause. Now, Terra Memoria is one of those JRPG comfort foods. It's once again a game made by a French studio, but just like with Clair Obscur, it's got all the elements synonymous with JRPGs as a style, and that's why I'm perfectly happy to recommend it to JRPG fans. It's also accessible in terms of the languages it offers. It supports English, French, German, Japanese, Portuguese and Chinese, so it covers a lot of bases for a lesser known title. Even before beginning, it's off to a good start. As for the game itself, well, I mean, look at it. The visuals are great. This pixel style reminded me of Octopath Traveler with the 2.5D aesthetic, and that's not a bad thing at all. If you're going to be similar to a game visually, it might as well be one of the best ones to release in the past 10 years. That's Octopath Traveler 2, by the way. Animations are smooth, the environments are varied and fantastical, and overall it's just a charming and cozy RPG adventure. The feeling of journeying over a large land, braving the unknown, it's what the genre is all about, and Terra Memoria nails that feeling, at least based on presentation. There are no random encounters here. Enemies show up on the map as floating flames of death, and when you encounter one, you fight them via turn-based combat. Turn order is shown on the bottom via a timeline. There are 3 active characters to use, and the idea is to focus on enemy weaknesses shown next to their health bars, thus reducing their shield counters to 0. Hitting a weakness removes 2 counters, standard attacks remove 1, and when it hits 0, they end up being stunned and pushed back on the timeline, and it makes them weak to every attack regardless of element that goes against them afterwards. But Terra Memoria does have a couple of neat mechanics of its own to allow it to stand out. For one, while there are free members who participate in combat, there are also free support characters who will randomly pair up with the ones fighting. And these support characters bring their own skill to the table. For instance, one will change damaging attacks to healing moves, another will allow you to switch the elements of a spell so you can more easily target weaknesses. It's a neat idea. And while the pairings are random, you can disable certain combinations in the party formation screen, so you can ensure that you only get the pairings that synergize well, though if I'm being completely honest, I would have preferred to just have that choice outright. It's not the deepest combat system, nor is it particularly hard with the exception of some bumps in difficulty here and there, but it is fun, and that's what matters most to me. Outside of combat, characters can be equipped with pins which grant stat bonuses or augment certain elements of spells, and a lot of importance is put on making sure these pins are up to date. To do this, you'll find guides as you enter new areas, and these will have new recipes for said pins, but it will also give you new recipes for food. The idea of crafting has a degree of importance in Terra Memoria, as not only can you create pins for yourself, but food is the best way to increase character HP. If you have the ingredients, Moshan can cook those into a dish via a simple minigame, and once done you get a permanent health boost. The crafting doesn't have as much importance as say an Atelier game, I mean what does, but it only feeds in more to this idea of a comforting adventure style RPG. It's a non-intrusive mechanic in terms of the flow of the game, but it's a welcome one in terms of aiding the game's ambience. The journey itself is linear, there's the odd branching path here and there, but in the majority it's a simple world to navigate, though it has to be said that there is a good amount of optional content on offer. Side quests are all over the place if you talk to the various NPCs, and you will need to do that because they aren't marked. And there are a bunch of trials centered around acquiring new abilities for likes of Syl and Moshan. Moshan gets new skills by meditating in front of trees, which he often needs to solve a puzzle for beforehand, while Syl enters the spirit realm to overcome a challenge against a deity in order to learn more of her spells. Its core offering is really good, and that alone is enough for me to recommend it, especially when considering its low asking price of just under £17. That's a more than fair price. Add on to that its lack of padding, it does feel like the game respects the player's time, and its good quality of life features like a fast forward option. There's a lot of good aspects with Terra Memoria. That being said, it is not perfect. The game certainly needed some better quality assurance in regards to the localization. It's clear the English translation was not done by a native speaker, as there are a number of grammar errors right from the start. They aren't too frequent, but they pop up enough to be noticeable, so it did become an issue. There are also sound bugs at times. When triggering enemy weaknesses, the soundtrack will cut off for a split second after it happens. Once again, not a deal breaker, but enough to break immersion. The difficulty of the combat, like I said before, in the majority, it is easy. But around the middle of the game, it does have a jump in difficulty that comes out of nowhere, even if you're keeping up to date with food buffs and higher level pins. At one point, the enemy started to one-shot my team when there was no indication of this a mere 10 minutes before in the previous area. However, if you've got the mechanics of the combat down, you can navigate it without much trouble, and death isn't punished heavily in this game. You simply go back to your last autosave, which triggers frequently. The music is a mixed bag. The overworld themes are quite good, while the battle themes are disappointing to say the least, and that feeling of disappointment carries over to the story as well, which is a premise that has been done many times before, and has been done better many times before as well. The characters are okay, but again, not the deepest even when considering their individual stories. Despite those issues though, I still had a good time with Terra Memoria. It's one of those 7.5 out of 10 games that I cannot deny has faults, but its core offering is great, and it remains fun for pretty much its entire runtime, which isn't that long either. It's an easy recommendation from me, especially if you want a cheap and relaxing turn-based RPG that won't take you months to complete. The 26th game I played was Tales of Grace's F Remastered, played on PC, and it took 57 hours to finish. Another one from my list that I want to play through this year, it was a no-brainer, a remastered Tales game that I never got to play when it first came out. Why not? And come those credits, yeah, I had a good time. Grace's F ticked a lot of boxes for me. So initially, what features were added for the remaster? Now, I don't have the original 2009 version under my belt, so I don't have a personal reference, but Bandai Namco stated that the remaster had given it, among other things, enhanced graphics, an enemy toggle function so you can avoid fighting if you so wish, a dash toggle option, skippable cutscenes, destination markers for the main story, an icon specifically for timed optional events, and the so-called grade shop, which is basically a host of options to make the game more convenient, like gaining more experience and lowering the cost of certain mechanics. I appreciate their existence, though for my playthrough I kept everything to its default settings, so that meant the only convenience I had was the main story marker. Everything else I left as is, no boons from the grade shop. I wanted to play the game as it was intended. Still, for a remaster, there's a good amount of options added. Now when you start up, Grace's F begins with the characters of Asbel and Hubert, two brothers and sons of a lordship. While playing in a nearby meadow, they stumble upon a girl with rocking pigtails who seems to have lost her memory, later referred to as Sophie. Asbel and Hubert come together to help her remember, which eventually develops into the wider story. Initially, Grace's F does have a decent story. The premise is simple, it's something that anyone who has played a handful of JRPGs has seen before, but what Grace's F has in its favour is that it's presented well. Simple stories can work if they're told like this. It's got good pacing for my tastes, I like how the central theme of the game is explored in terms of main story developments and optional events, and the ending is well earned. It builds up well over the game and it comes to a logical but satisfactory conclusion. The characters positively support that story too, it's a good collection overall. Unlike Vesperia for example, where I couldn't stand Rita, Grace's F didn't have a member who I soured towards, and I'm certain a reason for that is because of not only how well they develop over the course of the game, but also how they interact as a group. The chemistry is enjoyable to witness, especially during the skits. You can't talk about a Tales of game without at least giving mention to these, and for me this is a collection of some of the best I have seen yet. What I love about these skits is that they not only cover the serious moments, but they also convey a lot of humour as well, more so than I've seen in many other Tales games. It really comes to a head in the epilogue. Some of those skits are great in terms of humour, and like I say, a lot of it is optional. If you're not going around doing requests or revisiting towns frequently, you will miss a few. One thing I will always love with Tales, however, are the visuals. Many of these games have an easily recognisable style in terms of character design and colour palette, and Grace's F is no exception, with the experienced hand of Inamata at the helm. Visually pleasing characters, great sprite art, I don't think I've ever had a problem with aesthetic in a Tales title, so I'm glad Grace's F continues that trend. It doesn't mean it's flawless though, I did have an issue right near the beginning. I'd say for the first 5 hours or so, the game was a bit slow to get going. It's a mostly linear affair as you travel from point to point. You're mostly confined to the road via invisible walls, and there was a fair amount of backtracking in those early stages too. I accept that stories can start slowly sometimes, but it was a bit vexing going to the capital only to come back home on like 3 separate occasions within a short span of time. And much like the beginning, I also have some issues with the later parts of the game too, reserved mainly for the dungeons. Most of them are fine, they're not too long and puzzles are inoffensive, but later on they start to become obnoxious. Far longer than they needed to be, and they quickly became frustrating because the dungeons were not complex. Rather, they just required an inordinate amount of backtracking to flip switches, which then forced you to go back again to flip another switch, only to go back to where you started. There was one dungeon in particular which was all about taking crystals and moving them between different pedestals while switching obstacles around so they weren't blocking your path, and it was a pain to navigate. Easily the worst in the game, especially when adding in its length. And because of aspects like that, I might have turned off the encounters in another game. But in Grace's F, I was happy to keep it on, because the combat quickly became my favourite in the series thus far. Granted, I haven't played many of these games, like 6 if you include Grace's F, but one thing I know I get from Tales is an enjoyable action-centric combat system that's remained consistent across every one I've played. Yet saying that, Grace's F is the best. What I appreciated the most about it is that it balanced the aspects of defense and offense really well, mostly because of the need to manage something called chain capacity. Abbreviated to CC, every character has a pool of these points, and each art you use will cost a certain amount of CC to use. Arts are split between assault arts mapped to the B button on an Xbox One controller, and then you have burst arts linked to the A button, so the idea is to switch among them mid-combo to focus on enemy weaknesses, because if you do this, you can restore your CC counter to extend the combo further. When I ran out though, I dodged back, guard, wait for a specific aura represented by a coloured outline around the character model which gave certain benefits, and then I'd have to time my next attack around the enemy's actions. I'm not discrediting games like Berseria or Abyss, which I also think had fun combat, but this one just felt really good to play with, even with my lacking skill. There were a lot of mechanics that I personally wasn't able to execute even late on in the game, though I did pull off some sweet combinations here and there. Naturally, you've got different playstyles for each of the characters too, so you can experiment to find the ones you want to use. The combat is also enriched further via two specific mechanics. There are titles which you have to rank up for passive boons or completely new arts. Plus, these titles only appear at certain points in the story or through optional events, once again incentivizing exploration. And then for equipment, you have something called dualizing, which is basically a method of slotting in gems to improve the power of your equipment. But what's so good about it is that after a certain amount of battles, the equipment becomes tempered. And then you can combine two of these gems together to become a separate equipable item, while also reinstalling another gem to that same piece of gear, so even your worst equipment is gradually compounding and becoming more powerful, as long as you engage with the mechanic. And these gems are worth making because they will give you benefits like an increased CC counter, heal you when you kill an enemy, or lower the chance of being afflicted by a status ailment. It's a really good battle system in many respects, both in and out of combat, and I didn't get tired of it throughout my entire playthrough. Like I say, this is my favourite of the ones I've experienced so far. Which pretty much rounds out my thoughts on Grace's F. It's a great game. A simple yet satisfying story, excellent combat, a charming collection of characters, lots of optional content, and the quality of life features are welcome for the remaster. Yeah, it's worth checking out. The 27th game I played was Saga Frontier 2 Remastered. Played on PC and it took me 24 hours to finish. This came about as a perk of the channel. The remaster of Saga Frontier 2 shadow dropped out of nowhere, and I was off the code soon after that happened. I really enjoyed the remake of Romancing Saga 2, so I was all thumbs up for that offer. Thank you to Square for giving me one. Granted, however, it did take me a while to fire it up. I'd installed it on my PC for like 2 months before I launched it for the first time. I blame another game for taking all my time away, which is so long I'm still playing it. But eventually I got to Saga Frontier 2, and as soon as I started playing, I couldn't stop playing. Near on, the exact same addictive qualities of Romancing Saga 2 carried over to Saga Frontier 2. There's just some sort of hook this game had. The gameplay loop is a mix of challenge, experimentation, satisfaction, and just fun at a base level. A lot of what I liked about Romancing Saga 2 seemed to replicate itself here, and it's no wonder I found myself engrossed in the game for hours on end. Saga Frontier 2 takes place in the land of Sandale, and the story is split between two characters. You have an exiled prince called Gustav on one side, and then a young digger called Will Knight who is searching for the cause of his parents' death on the other. Much like Romancing Saga 2, the story of Frontier takes place over a number of years, around 100 from start to finish. And what happens is you choose to play certain episodes relating to each character from different parts of their lives. So in the case of Gustav, you first see his birth, then his exile, followed by his eventual growth into adulthood, conveyed either through strictly story segments or events that have a mix of story and gameplay. And this approach to a narrative, I liked it. A lot. It's rare to see a story like this in a JRPG. They normally take place over a few years at most, rather than an entire character's lifetime. In Saga Frontier, I got to experience the lives of Gustav and Will Knight, actually see the growth of those individuals over the years, and what shaped them into who they eventually became. And I can't deny I felt an emotional attachment to both of them, seeing them change from toddlers or teenagers into wizened old men in some cases. But it's not just them, it then follows on to their children, their children's children, and various other party members who also were influenced by them. So in a way, I wasn't just attached to the character of Will Knight, for example, I was attached to the Knight's family, especially when considering the contents of the story itself. For Gustav, it's all about seeing his legacy and how others react to that legacy further down the line. Characters will grow old, and die eventually, they will retire from adventuring and so on. It's a great way to tell a far-reaching story, and Frontier makes it work well in the majority, though what I did find jarring is that the town's NPCs didn't seem to change at all even many years later. They seem to be ageless. That's not the only issues though. I will concede there were times when I was a bit lost with the story. There were certain characters who are only introduced for a limited number of events, and some of them have a habit of using the same name as well. There were like 5 different Gustavs from start to finish, not to mention names aren't given on the speech bubbles either, so sometimes it got a bit crowded on the screen, and the only way to identify some of the characters is to memorise the character model. Easier said than done. But in the majority, I liked both stories here. Same can be said of the gameplay too. Saga Frontier 2 doesn't have traditional leveling up, instead you increase certain parameters after battle like HP, weapon points, spell points and so on, plus you can increase efficiency with certain weapon types if you use them in battle. In terms of customization, you have 2 weapon slots and 4 equipment slots, some of which will have affinity to certain anima which gives you access to your spells. And then following on from this idea of moving between generations, characters can inherit the attributes of previous adventurers you have played with. So even when their time has ended, you don't lose that progress, it just compounds further. It uses a turn-based battle system up to 4 members, but Saga Frontier 2 also brings in a neat one-on-one duel mode in certain cases too. As suggested, it's a fight between one party member and the opponent, and the idea is you combine certain moves together to unleash a combo. If you do it in a certain way though, you can spark a new glimmer, which is basically a skill. And this is where the experimentation comes in. I was fiddling around with every combination I could think of to try and find those abilities, and in many cases I would fail because there's a pretty complex algorithm that goes into whether you spark a glimmer. It depends on stuff like an enemy's spark rate, the level you attack versus their defense. It's involved and confusing at times. I didn't even try to understand it when I read up on it later on in the game. I was happy to just experiment away until I got what I needed. And in many cases it worked. Saga Frontier 2 wants you to experiment. It wants you to get down with the nitty-gritty of its combat system, and if you do that, you'll be mostly fine. Emphasis on that word mostly though. I did bump into a wall right at the end of the final boss. Quite simply, I was under-leveled for the fight. I had the equipment and I had most of the skills, but I just needed higher numbers. So that added about 4 hours to my playtime by the end. The second go round, I beat the boss without much issue. And that's fine. Grinding is just a thing that happens in most JRPGs. If I bump into a wall, the general response for one of these games is to grind some levels. I'm not going to knock Saga Frontier 2 for that, especially considering that it is quite a short game all said and done. It does help too that the game nails pretty privilege. This is one gorgeous looking game. The watercolour aesthetic that makes up the world is perfection. Every line that makes up a building or a wall feels deliberate and impactful. It conveys scale and distance expertly, and it brings an undoubted agelessness to the look of the game. I loved the look of Saga Frontier 2. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best looking retro game I've played. Maybe the remaster gave it a bit more sharpness, but I looked at some pictures of the original and it still looks amazing. Music is decent, not entirely my cup of tea I'll admit, but there's some good tunes that make up the soundtrack. And combine that all together, why wouldn't I want to spend more time with it? Those 4 hours of grinding flew by. Look, I get it, Saga has a reputation. People call it opaque, they say it's difficult to pick up, and maybe that does apply to other games in the series, but from the 2 I've played, I don't see anything to hold a new player back. Saga Frontier 2 is well worth picking up even if you're a modern JRPG fan. Its fundamentals are good, and it's got a unique take on story and gameplay that you won't find in many other games. For the price of admission, which as of the time of recording is under £30, you could do way worse than this. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.